Here we go. So the changing economic landscape is going to be something which is characterized by a world of interference. Success basically is the management of efficiency and the management of change. So far, so good. But we are all the victims somewhere of the global economy on one hand, of the technology, of the mindset of people. Everything is changing and everything has an impact on us. This presentation is not about numbers, it's about ideas. John Kenneth Galbraith used to say the following: the only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology respectable. However, there is some good forecasting also taking place. So we are going to try to see what is going to happen to our world. First, we tend to forget that, of course, it's not in good shape, but at the end of last year, it was not in good shape either. Before the COVID-19, it was not a blue sky. We had geopolitical issues, protectionism, Brexit, energy cost, exchange rates problem, interest rates problem, energy transition, digital transformation, climate change. All this was impacting our world economy. And on the top of that came the pandemic. And some countries were already almost in recession. And then the context was changing, the governance context. We were with a new governance because we had more pressure for transparency. We had more pressure for increased activism. And of course, a lot of opinions on the economy. And we had to manage all that. And when the COVID-19 came, we had an addition of breakdowns. You know, the supply chain breakdown, of course, because China was closing and 40% of the electronic components were coming from China. Consumption breakdown, shopping, tourism because of the lockdown, and of course, a breakdown in infrastructure, especially in travel and shipping. What we had foreseen at the beginning of the year was that the lockdown in general would cost 2 to 3 months of GDP in 1 year. And this is about what we are seeing in the numbers. I mean, we know the numbers for Malaysia, and this is GDP growth during the past 12 months. If you are looking at your region, Asia, everybody is in very difficult situation with the exception of China, which is actually the only country growing today, plus 3.2% GDP growth. Europe on average, minus 15%. Look at the United Kingdom, minus 21%. And of course, the largest economy in the world, the United States of America, minus 9.5%. And if we are looking at Latin America, the problems are just as big as everywhere else. So we need to find out from this situation, where do we go? Are you worried about what is going to happen? And this is a little cartoon. Relax, my broker says the economy will bounce back. Answer, yes, but I am your broker. So we are going to be in a situation where still, despite everything, we need to be positive. We may have an obsolete assessment of the situation, or at least a difficult assessment of the situation. Should we believe the statistics, GDP, productivity, inflation, working hours, they are changing a lot? Should we believe the stock market, which has predicted 9 out of the past 5 recessions, and which was growing at the beginning of the year when the economy was going down? Should we believe the economists like Franco Modigliani, the Nobel Prize, who said economists cannot make forecasts because when they are doing forecasts, they change the situation. So we are in a situation where it's a little bit difficult to know where we are going. If you take the GDP, was invented by Simon Kuznets in the 30s in the US, and it is all about added value. It doesn't tell you anything about assets. And in a nation like Sarawak, assets are fundamental to assess the competitiveness. If you are looking also at the GDP, it only speaks about financial transaction. If there is not a financial transaction, it is not recorded. For example, an improvement in a computer software, this has no impact on the GDP in theory. So this is very critical for the future. Inflation is the same. If you are looking at inflation on the radar screen, I mean, most countries today are near the zero line because, of course, of the economic recession. And if you are looking at those who have a little bit of inflation, China, Russia, and of course, at the very top, Argentina and Turkey, they are really the minority today. But when you are trying to find out how do we calculate inflation, well, there is somebody in an office which is collecting data or going in the field and asking company what's going on. Then the company are adapting to the price. But if you are looking at the new economy, which is at the center of your discussion, and of course at the strategy of Sarawak, you will see that the online economy is changing the price continuously. Amazon will change the price 2 to 3 times a day, and they will even reduce the price during the weekend. So they are becoming price makers, a completely different situation that we had seen in the past, daily inflation maybe. And actually, that's where the new technology can be useful. Space technology, Space Now, for example, is taking satellites and drones to see the activities of factories. A company like PriceStat will use online technology to look at the daily inflation by using your smartphones or how you are buying products online. So we can do a lot better in trying to find out the statistics on what is happening. Now, inflation is changing, but some of the things are not changing. For example, inflation is paying $30 for an haircut, which used to cost $15 when you had hair. Of course, there is no personal experience in this one. So the real issue is, how do you react in time of crisis? Well, one of the things we have learned from the past recession is that basically you have to ensure that the money is flowing. And this is what the central banks are doing. They are printing money, and they are making sure that the money goes to the banks, to the companies, and to the SMEs. What is new today that the government are stepping in, and with the fiscal policy, they are trying to make sure that some money goes to the people themselves. This is the helicopter money we have seen in the United States of America, or trying to protect the jobs from disappearing. All this is happening today with one very big unknown is to know what will happen with private consumption, which is about 60 to 70% of the GDP in Europe and the US. In Malaysia, it's about 49%. And the real question is, will the consumer spend, or are they going to save because they want to save, or they are forced because they cannot spend, the shops are closed, or because they are afraid of the situation? And all this is going to be leading to what is perhaps an end control chain reaction. It means that if I give as an example tourism, which is one also of the pillar of Sarawak's strategy, it's about 10% of the world GDP. And with the lockdown, you have this chain reaction where you start by closing a restaurant and you finish by closing a plane factory somewhere. And in between, everybody else is suffering. Hotels, travels, events, real estate, financial services, the suppliers, the distributors, and the families, everybody is being impacted. And at the end, the governments are also impacted because the stimulus packages are costing a lot of money. And of course, the tax losses are also there. At the end of the day, we have a lot of debt. And this is exactly what we have to look at for 2021. Is it going to be a lost year, a year of transition? Everybody is waiting for a vaccine. But if we have it, it has to be certified, manufactured, distributed, and applied. And this is going to take a lot of time. And the question for many companies is going to be, how long can you hold your breath, living on a cliff edge? And those who are going probably to be the most affected is going to be this part of the economy, which is in contact with people, and this part of the economy physically contact with people, and of course, the small and medium-sized enterprises, because the large ones have a kind of cushion in order to react to the situation. The next issue, in my opinion, in this context of chain reaction, is that we may be moving from a crisis in liquidity, which is something which is traditional in a recession and which leads to debt. And basically, we know how to do it in the short term. But if the recession is taking some time to be overcome, then we may have a crisis in solvability, which is going to lead to bankruptcy simply because the customers, the business is disappearing. And I think this is probably one of the biggest danger for the months to come. For the government, after the crisis, we will have to manage what I call the tail of the comet, because it will be debt everywhere. And the government so far have spent about $4.2 trillion worldwide in fiscal stimulus, with a lot of budget deficit around and a lot of debt. The same is happening, of course, for the companies, which have been raising their corporate debt, for the people who have more personal debt. And most probably on the debt front, we are going to find a situation where low interest rates are going to remain, extended maturity on loan, grace period, and perhaps some cancellation of the debt. What is interesting, in my opinion, is that the government debt, which used to be about worldwide about $70 trillion, is going this year to explode by 25%, according to the OECD, and will reach 137% of the GDP in average. May I remind you that the average debt level, which most of the central banks accept as to be manageable, is 60%. We are in a situation, therefore, in addition, where most of this debt is in those large countries that you are seeing on the chart here. And actually, the real problem is going to be the emerging markets, because those large countries are going to attract, to absorb all the money for the debt. And the emerging nations, which are by definition a bit more risky, will have more problem on international markets in order to be able to raise some money. So the world economy, we have to ask ourselves also, after this short-term period, what will be the new normal? Well, probably we are going to open a new book in the book of globalization. The past chapter was one global world, cost efficiency, just in time, high profits. And of course, it was a world vulnerable to disruption. The new chapter is going to be a decoupled world. I will come back on that. Less economy of scale, duplication of technology. I will come back on that. More resilience, but the price will be more cost and less profit. If I would have to summarize these two worlds, the world of yesterday was a world of just in time. The world of tomorrow will be a world of just in case. And I think it means that the face of globalization is going to change. We are going to see a lot of decoupling of the economies. US and China saying, you know, we want to be more resilient. We want to have a stronger domestic base, less dependent from the other. And this will apply also with technology, what we call the decoupling of technology, where everybody will want to also develop its own base. China is going to invest $2 trillion in technology. The US is doing the same. Europe is doing the same. Less dependency from the others. And of course, it will mean for business more fragmented opportunity and more cost. And this situation is, of course, a theory. But maybe it cannot happen that easily, because the world is still global and you cannot jump off the train. If I take, for example, Europe, you know, Europe today is still depending on 41% to Russia on the supply of fossil fuels. And when we are taking the entire strategy about new energies, 42% of the import on wind, photovoltaic, lithium-ion batteries are coming from China. So you are trading one dependency for another one. And if you are looking about those famous rare earths, the 17 rare earths, well, actually Europe and the United States are importing practically everything. So dependency will still be there, perhaps in a different way. The real worry is about protectionism. We used to be in a world which was open, and now we are entering in a world of forbidden world where we see a lot of countries which have protectionist measures. I think that the big difference with the past is that we are moving from a rhetoric of job protection to one of national security. Most of the measures which have been taken, let's say, between the US and China were not driven by protecting jobs, but by protecting national security, which means something very political and something which is very difficult to negotiate rationally. And this is something which is quite dramatic, because maybe Europe is going to step in, and you know, nations like Sarawak or Malaysia altogether will have some problems to find out what are the real markets and which ones are open. I think also that the next important issue is, of course, higher tariffs. The higher tariffs for company is manageable, because all what you do is you pass it to the customer and you increase the price. Where we may have a big problem is if protectionism gets to market access, where you forbid market access to certain companies or to certain countries. And if this is happening, there is no alternative. The companies have really a lot of problems. And what we have seen recently is that in the United States of America, actually, the companies are still operating in China. The deficit of the US to China in terms of trade is practically the same that at the beginning of the year. And even companies are suing now the government in order to get those tariffs down, saying it is killing the business. A lot of the business may go back. This is a lady telling her colleagues, we outsource it to India. and they outsource it to China, who outsource to Korea, who outsource to Mexico, and then she adds, and then they outsource it back to us. So a lot of the business may come back, but not all the business. And then the question is going to be, where will it stop? I mean, next year we are all discussing about COVID, but when you are looking at the list of the kind of catastrophe we have had in the past, it's a long list. And you may wonder, is it going to stop there? Or should we try to develop a new approach, which is called disaster management, just to be ready? Remember the just in case. And the traditional management really could be defined as being rational, systematic, efficient, planned use of resources. Disaster management can be defined as low probability and high impact, and frozen resources and non-productive costs. What I mean by that is that we have to put in place a lot of processes which we hope we will never use, a lot of stocks, masks, etc., which we hope we will never have to use. But this is a cost, and we will have to ensure that this cost has to be borne every year. And this is something which is going to stay with us for the future. In addition, and I think this is something which is quite important in the strategy of Sarawak, it's the emergence of new infrastructure. The traditional infrastructure are important. Travel, shipping, roads, energy, this is fine. But now we are seeing new infrastructures. We are seeing e-commerce with Amazon. We are seeing digital payment, for example, on financial. We are seeing e-banking, N26, which is the largest one in Europe. We are seeing e-medicine. We are seeing teleworking, and of course, e-learning. Now, what is interesting with all these new infrastructures is that most of them are in the hand of the private sector. And it means we will have to have a public-private partnership between the government and the private sector to find out who is going to manage what. Or could we leave those infrastructure entirely in the private sector? Let me remind you, infrastructure, of course, are very important. Number one, because you are working for your children. Number two, generally, it belongs to a country. Not all the time, but generally. It has a lot of impact on the rest of the economy, what we call the induced impact. And finally, you have a very diverse employment impact, which means that, you know, the engineer is working and the blue collars are working. There are very few sectors that can do that. And it means that, of course, there are a new project, but a lot of easy win are when you spend money on maintenance. Increasing maintenance of infrastructure gets a lot of very good impact directly for the economy and is very powerful. And then, of course, we have to ask ourselves if globally, state capitalism is not back. You know, in terms of crisis, everybody went to the government, and asked about rescue packages. And the government did so, you know, about $1,000 billion already accepted. Another pack is being discussed now in the US, $750 billion in Europe. But of course, the empire is striking back. I mean, the governments are asking something in return: participation to the capital of companies, right of veto on transaction. Why wait? Access to strategic option. For example, Germany helping Lufthansa, but say provided you are buying now clean planes. Restriction on dividends, share buyback. We give you money, but you don't give dividends. And finally, of course, more regulation and more taxation. I think all this is coming to us very quickly and will change the picture. But the other very big impact is going to be obviously what is at the center of your discussion today, and it's going to be the technology. And technology is going beyond technology. Let me remind you, of course, that who owns the technological highway? Of course, it is Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon. You know those companies very well. Why are they successful? Number one, because they have the technology. Number two, they have the platform. Number three, they have the data. And number four, they have the markets. But what is interesting is that they are not staying on the highway. They are branching out. They are going elsewhere. What they are doing, like Amazon is a world leader in cloud computing, and Amazon is investing massively in retail food. If you are looking at Alphabet and Facebook, there are about 70% of advertising digital around the world. If you are looking at Tesla is becoming a world leader in battery production. And if you are looking at Apple, and remember, I'm broadcasting this morning from Switzerland. Well, Apple last year became the largest watch producer in the world. 26 million watches produced. The entire production of the Swiss watch industry is 24 million watches only. Now, of course, our watches are a bit more expensive, but that's a detail. But what it means is that in the past, we never expected that one day the biggest competitor of the Swiss watch industry would be Apple. And the same is happening also in electronic payment with Tencent and Financial, and perhaps one day with Libra of Facebook. And in this kind of situation, it means the following. This is a little cartoon where the little boy is saying, okay, how many monsters are under my bed tonight? And I think that every CEO has to ask himself the same question. You know, number one, who will be our competitors tomorrow? And number two, where will they come from? And I think this is important because most likely the competitors are going to come from industry sectors or countries that we have not expected. And that's why we have to broaden our horizon and to look far beyond what we used to do in the past. And this leads us to all the unsolved issues about technology, all the challenges that we will have to solve. The first one to be solved is going to be that we should never forget that at the end, there is always a product. Digital economy is dematerialized, but at the end, there is always a product. This is this little restaurant owner, pizza owner, who is saying the following on the phone: sorry, we cannot email your pizza as attachment. And this is true. And the second is energy. Technology is a very big consumer of energy. If you are looking at processing power, storage power, delivery power, it's consuming a high level of energy, and even self-driving cars are consuming 20% more energy than the traditional ones. And you may remember that a few months ago, we had this big competition to be between a computer with artificial intelligence, Watson, and the world champion of Go. Well, AlphaGo, this computer was consuming 440 kilowatt an hour, and the world champion with his brain was consuming only 20 watt an hour. So we are very efficient. Now, some people are also making some saving of energy there, but that's another problem. But this has a very big impact because we should never forget that, you know, digital economy is energy consuming. 4% of the world emission of CO2, while aviation is only 2.4%. If you are looking at the CO2 emission, Netflix is consuming every year the same amount of CO2 than Belgium. If you are taking Google search per day, it's about 7 times the Paris-New York flight. If you are looking at all the waste of the digital economy, it's about the equivalent of 5,000 Eiffel Towers a year. So we should not forget all this impact on energy. The other one is going, obviously, to be employment. It will create employment. It will also perhaps change or transfer some employment. And at the unemployment office, maybe we will have this kind of situation, a robot saying next. But what we may have also in addition is a robot speaking to another robot, because the life expectancy of a robot is not very big either. And if you are looking at a company like Amazon, on average, it's about 800,000 employees and 200,000 robots already now. So it could be that for somebody working there, you know, your colleague could be a robot. Imagine the psychological issue when you are speaking to a robot or you're going to take a coffee break with a robot. So this is something which is pretty new and which we will have to solve. And an additional problem to be solved about robots, and this was read by, when you are looking where they are, automotive, electronics, etc., where they are, of course, much cheaper on average. This is the price in the United States of America. And the next issue, which was raised by Bill Gates, was, should we tax them? Should we tax robots? Or should we accept this is part of technological innovation? And the big question, of course, is to know what is a robot. Is it a computer program or is it really a humanoid? Then the next issue, which is going to be pretty difficult to solve, is going to be size. The technological companies are pretty big, as you know. I have given a kind of average of those companies with a market capitalization. And the big discussion we are going to have today is actually, should we break them down? Should we allow them to have the platform and the services together? Or should we do like it was done in the US with the banking, telecommunication industry? Should we really, or of course oil, should we split them up? If you look at, and I mentioned cloud computing, Amazon Web Services from Amazon, it was calculated by Morgan Stanley. If you would put the company on the market tomorrow, they would get about $438 billion in market capitalization. This was done in January. And actually, it would be a company 3 times the size of IBM, just to show you the size we are speaking about in terms of this. And then you wonder if we are not going into a kind of black hole economy, where at the center you have a lot of money, a lot of technology, a lot of innovation in smaller company around, and then you have this system where everything is being sucked in the middle and is absorbing all the innovation. And then the big risk for many nations, especially emerging nations, is going to be, can small company grow big, or are they going to be bought out by large companies immediately before they become competitors? It's a very big issue, because if you are looking how big is big today, this is for the US, the so-called Russell Index, 2,000 small cap companies in the US. The market capitalization in September was $1,900 billion, which is exactly the same as the market capitalization of Apple. And it shows how much those people have firing power. And then you have the same thing as a black hole in finance. Again, technology and money at the center, and then you have all the investors on the side, and everybody is going to go to the same company, and as a result, we are going to have over-capitalization of the same companies. And by expansion, if you are looking at the market capitalization, this was February, but the proportions are about the same. Look at the technology sector by the 20 largest companies in the world. It is so much bigger than banks, pharma, oil and gas, and the rest. So everything is going to the same direction with overcapitalization of the some companies, and it will mean perhaps also undercapitalization of other companies. And of course, you can see that in the valuation, the animal spirits. If you are looking at GM and Ford, look at the turnover. It's about $140, $150 billion. If you look at Tesla, $24 billion last year, as well as the car production. Now, if you are looking at the market cap, General Motors is $40 billion, Ford $26 billion, Tesla is $395 billion. So somehow we are seeing what is happening now, overcapitalization of some, undercapitalization of others. And this leads us to the business models. The business models of the future are going to be driven by technology. In the past, we have seen these with agriculture, writing, printing, the steam engine technology. What is different today is that in one lifetime, my lifetime, I have seen the personal computing, internet, mobile telecom, and artificial intelligence. Just to share a secret with you, I wrote my PhD thesis with a pen and on paper. Now, if I tell that to my students, they are going to say, wow, this professor is much older than he looks like. But this was another world. And we have to adapt to that, and we have to adapt the business models to it. So if you are looking at the Oxford Dictionary of English and you say, what is a sale? They will tell you it's the exchange of a commodity for money. But actually, none of them are true today. Because you could have very well a business model without transaction of money. Like the one we see on Facebook and Google with personal data, it's free. You can have the same thing with no ownership. Like what you are saying with the subscription model, the licensing model, what you see with Netflix, Spotify, etc., where actually you can buy the use of a product, but not the product itself. And this is completely new. This is completely new. And then you have a new trend. And the new trend, sometimes wondering, you look at all those companies, they had something in common. They were a big success story, but they had in common that they were not making any profit. Actually, they were becoming non-profit companies. And this is something very strange, very unusual. It's very well illustrated by this little cartoon. We don't do anything. We are just attractive to high-risk investors. So we are in this situation where we have to ask ourselves, what do people want? What is going to be the future? And I think the first thing they will want is security. They will want security, certification with quality, and perhaps for companies and products, sanitary certification and certification of origin. They will want to have transparency. They want to be able to track where the products come from and its various components. They want ethics. They want to make sure that the code of conduct are ensured and the contract also. And they want sustainability. I think all this is going to be together with us for quite some time and will have an impact on the way we are going to do business. And we have to ask ourselves if the market is increasingly emotional. One day I received a very unusual advice by an American banker who told me the following. He said, "Hey, Prof, please don't confuse me with facts." I thought it was a joke, but it was not. He told me, no, actually, I'm more interested about what people think than about the reality. And you may remember there was this movie, yes, and a book made by Al Gore called An Inconvenient Truth. And you go at the movie, nobody goes there. Next to the door, you have another theater, a reassuring lie, and everybody is going there. And this is very much in line with what the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said one day. He said in a little book called The Art of Being Right, he said, actually, few people know how to think, but everyone wants to have an opinion. And I think this is very correct. Everyone wants to have an opinion, and we have to respect it, but we have to understand also this is maybe part of something we could call the new tribe effect, which means that we are in a world where we have a prehistoric past, but we have also advanced technology, where people suddenly are back to the behaviors of the past. And it's a theory now in economics where people believe they are also belonging to new tribes, where belonging is more important than being rational, that cohesion is more important than truth, and that simple is more important than balance. You can see that maybe in the United States, America today with the election, but we see it also with modern technology. We belong to a tribe. You have those belonging to Apple and those belonging to Samsung and Google, and nobody is agreeing to switch. So this is going to be a very big challenge for the future, because Alexis de Tocqueville said one day, a false but clear idea will always have more power than a true but complex idea. And I think this is a problem we have now with the new technology, and it is that basically we have to ask ourselves if we can control all these opinions. How far can we regulate? I mean, the GDPR, General Data Protection, is being in place in many countries, not only in Europe, but also in Asia. The access of data, private and public, is being regulated. And the big question is, how far can you go? And this little boy is telling his teacher, actually, before I write my name on the board, I need to know how you are going to use it. So we are going to see what it means, because the companies have understood, they went ahead and they made some rules. Now, this is the Apple Media Service Terms and Conditions. Ask yourself if anybody has read that. At the end of it, they say, please read the agreement carefully to confirm your understanding, and then click agree. Nobody has done that. And nobody has done that because I counted it, it's 6,806 words long. And by comparison, the United States Declaration of Independence is 1,337 words long, and it gives you a lot more hope. So we are in this situation where basically we can say that the challenge, very well expressed by Albert Einstein, is everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. It's easy to be complex. It's much more difficult to be simple. And of course, we see how countries are managing their value system to adapt what is happening now. One of the ways to look at the value system is to go in the street and ask people, what are the keywords which reflect your value system? This is Nanjing Road in Shanghai. And according to a Gallup opinion poll, the Chinese, they work hard and get rich, 68% of them. Now, of course, we can think, what about our children? And now I'm speaking about, the country I know. I don't know in Sarawak if you have the same experience. But I know that if I would ask my children, they would say, China, it's work hard and get rich. What about you, my son, my daughter? They will tell me, forget about the first part of the sentence, which is totally uninteresting, and pass immediately to what is important, get rich. And we have a generation of quick money. They want to get rich without working too much. And this is what we found a lot in the technology sector. But then you have to go to the other generation and you said, work hard, get rich. Your elder brother, elder sister doesn't want to work hard. They just want to get rich. What about you? Well, they will tell you, actually, I don't want to get rich. And you will say, but how come you don't want to work hard? How come you don't want to get rich? How come you don't want to build your own flat or your own house? And they will tell you, but mom, dad, why do you want me to work hard all my life to build my own house while you have already done it. All I have to do is just to wait. So we have an entire generation, at least in Europe and the US, where we are struggling with this concept of they are not hungry enough. And it means we have a youth quick. And this, I think, is worldwide. And generation X, Y, Z are not defined by age, they are defined by technology. When you are looking at the baby boomer, it was the TV, the X was the PC, the Y is a smartphone, and probably the Z will be the robot, the artificial intelligence. So what is this youth quake all about? Number one, it's about meism. They are very self-centered, self-fulfillment, narcissism. Actually, this is a selfie generation. They spend their time taking pictures of themselves. When they travel, they don't take picture of the monument, they just take picture of themselves. They could save on the travel. And what we have seen is that a lot of them are escaping reality. What we see that on average, they spend 10 hours and 39 minutes in front of a screen. And it means 90% of them are checking their smartphone within 15 minutes of waking up. If you are doing it, it means that you are young. And in addition, 65% prefer losing their car rather than losing their phone. Now, the reason is because the car belongs to the parents. But this is striking. And the second thing is that there is less affiliation, political or religious. Actually, they are very much concerned by the state of the world. They want to increase the state of the world, to improve, the state of the world. They would probably be very much in line with what Henry Ford said when he said a business that makes nothing but money actually is a poor business. And I think this is very correct. This is very correct because I see it with my students when they want to work somewhere, whether it is in government or in the private sector, making money is not enough. They want to contribute to the future. And then they have a strong sense of entitlement. They are demanding and intrusive. They do not understand what confidentiality means. They want to have access to all the information. They want to have access to transparency. And that's what Mark Twain said one day. He said, actually never do wrong, especially when somebody is looking. And in today's world, everybody is looking through internet, through social media. It's a transparent world. And the fourth thing is the concept of ownership, sharing economy, where they believe free is cool. Free is cool. And this is a situation which is very challenging to explain. I tried to my students that there is no free lunch. And they say, well, I said, don't you think that somebody has to work hard, has to make a living, etc., and you should pay? And they say, yes, Prof, we agree. Somebody should pay, but not us. And the best thing that I could find was a quote by Tim Cook to explain that. And Tim Cook said, if you think that a product is free, then he added, then you are the product. And I think they start to realize and to understand what is happening there. And it is also now connected to the revolution at work, where the positive impact is certainly work-life balance, saving working space in many companies, health and environment protection. But then, of course, it's going to raise a number of issues: productivity. Number two, security of data, but also of people. What happens if they have an accident at home? And finally, psychological issue. I feel cut off from the office. Maybe they are taking decision in my back. And we are going to work that also on the hybrid workspace, what's happening elsewhere. This little guy saying, my boss says I can start working from home 2 days a week. And then he had on Saturday and Sunday. So we have to find some regulation on that. Corporate culture has been also evolving very quickly. And as Anita mentioned in his introduction, I wrote a book on that. And indeed, in the first part of our corporate culture, everybody is a tiger. It's company achievement, work success. We are working more than 60 hours a week. We are company animals. We are very mobile, trying to find something to kill everywhere. Success driven, fully dedicated. This is what we are doing. The problem is the following. After a certain time, for everybody, you get married, you get a house, you get a mortgage, and from a tiger, you transform yourself into a cat. You want social achievement, you are interested in work-life balance, you are working 40 to 60 hours a week, you want to have personal achievement, you are mobile with a home base, you agree to be moving during the week but not the weekend, and you are interested in work-life balance. And after a certain period of time, another transformation occurs. suddenly you transform yourself into a dinosaur, into a dinosaur. And it means that you want to work less than 50 hours a week. You are interested in life quality. You are totally immobile. You tell everybody, forget about me. Don't touch me. Don't tell me anything. Just let me out of the place at 5 o'clock. And you are interested in life-life balance. And this is always happening. This is normal in the life of a company. And I think that we have to manage that the best we can, because everybody has a value. Even the dinosaurs have a value because they are the memory of the company. They remember what happened before and why we did. So in conclusion, what does it mean for you? If I would recap, I would say the recipe, in a certain extent of success, is a very solid ground for the management of efficiency. Number two, the management of change. And number three, the management of complexity. The world is complex. And even simplifying the world is a competitive advantage. And on the top of that, we need to have a mindset of imagination. We need people who are saying, why not? And not people who are saying, why? Why not doing it is really the name of the game. You need people who have a lot of energy and who are going to say, why not doing it now? Not tomorrow, it's now. You want people who are committed and who are going to say, I do it with you. A lot of people are saying, why me? I didn't do anything. But actually, they should be involved. And of course, there is the entire concept of legitimacy. Why us? Why are we the best to do the job, wherever we are? And I think there are two things to conclude, which I think are very important also for the future. Number one is that we have to be aware of the law of unintended consequences. And this is all daily, British colonial times, and they had a very big problem. There are too many cobra snakes in the street. So the city hall, they had a very brilliant idea. They said, okay, we tell everybody, if you find a cobra snake, you cut the head, and you bring us the head, and we will give you a reward for every head. The problem is that our Indian friends are very clever people. They start to raise cobra snakes in their kitchen, and then cut the head, and they went to City Hall, and they start to make a big business with it. At a certain extent, City Hall said, okay, I cannot cope with the situation anymore, so they stopped the reward. And what happened is that everybody put the snakes back in the street. And at the end, you had more snake in the street than at the beginning, and of course, you had less money in the government. And finally, and this will be my last one, I think one of the most complex issues will be that timing is going to be everything. Timing is going to be everything, and I want to give you an example that it is not if it is right or not, it is also when the policy is right or not. In August 1978, Laker Airways launches the first low-cost airline. August 1978, and it was a failure. He went into bankruptcy. In August 1993, was launched the Newton by Apple. It was the first personal digital agenda, smartphone, whatever you call it. Very interesting, but it was a flop. Nobody wanted that. Apple almost went into bankruptcy. The chairman, John Sculley, had to resign. It was a major catastrophe. So it is interesting because today, low-cost airlines are part of our daily life. Personal digital agenda, smartphone are part of our daily life. The first one, they have been on the market, they were a flop. From that, we can learn two things. Number one, never, ever launch a product in August. It's bad luck. But the second thing that we should learn was very well said by Montaigne, the French writer, who said the following: it is very wrong to be right before everyone else. So I think that in terms of the competitiveness of a nation, and I know that in Sarawak you are now rethinking about 2030 and what are the objectives and what are the enablers, and it's a remarkable undertaking. I think that all of us, we have to think also about the timing and the right timing. I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. And I think, Anita, if you can go back online, maybe we have some questions.
Hi there, Professor Garelli. That was amazing. So